Good evening. Welcome to Griswold Community Talkback. I'm Ed Berdick, your host for tonight's program. We're on Mondays from 5 to 6. I know I haven't been on for a while because of I'm in the process of selling my house and that, so a lot of things have come up. But please call in 860-440-3154. The number will be posted on the bottom of the screen throughout the program occasionally. I'm Ed Berdick. We're going to touch on a lot of things tonight because I've been absent for a while, and I'm glad you're for patience. But we got national, international, and local and state, and a lot of things have happened. But I want to kind of do some legal or some announcements for the Griswold area. Just tune in, or we got our national elections, but we also have our local town meetings and stuff. So follow through on your selectmen meetings and stay apprised. And we get a couple of events coming up in Griswold on Veterans Day, November 11th. I know it's a while back, but it's going to come up on us quick. So at 11 o'clock at Veterans Park, we'll have our annual Veterans Day ceremony. So I want to just remind people, and I will do in the future too, to turn out. We have a program every year down there, and we involve the pastors, civic leaders. We have a coffee house, Veterans Coffee House, that meets, I think, every Tuesday morning, 8:30 to 10 o'clock at the Senior Center on Taylor Hill Road. They're participating, the American Legion, Post 15, the VFW, Post 10,004. We get the high school choir. We get the rifle squad, and we get quite a few keynote speakers that come in. So we're still looking for the keynote speaker, and once we get that name, we'll get that out there. But it's a 40-minute program, and this year we're going to have a few extra benefits and amenities. We're going to have a coffee and hot chocolate stand there at the Veterans Park, and we're going to have a few other excitements. We're trying to widen the program this year to celebrate all veterans in our armed forces, past, future, and present. Okay, enough on that. Basically, the big news to catch up on is we're winding down to our national presidential elections. And now it's easy to lose focus because the media tends to focus on the top of the ticket, which is the presidency. In this case, we got Kamala, or Kamala, depending on how it's pronounced. I really don't know because I hear it both ways. But Kamala Harris is the Democratic endorsed candidate. Tim Walz, governor out there in Minnesota, I think it is, vice president. They were endorsed by the Democratic National Convention in Chicago after Biden announced that he was not, he was in the primary, he won the primary, but President Biden kind of resigned that ticket, and the Democrats endorsed or sanctified the vice president, Kamala Harris, to be their candidate, and she chose Timothy Walz of Minnesota to be her candidate, her running mate. So on the other side, everybody knows Trump is the Republican-endorsed candidate with J.D. Vance, senator, a new freshly minted senator of Ohio, better known before as author for Hillbilly Elegy, and there was a movie made of his novel. Yale School graduate, former Marine, Ohio State, and then Yale Law School. Pretty successful investor and entrepreneur pretty much now, successful author too. So young, pretty young. I think he's 39 years old if I'm correct. So on that side, that's where we are. And depending on what polls you follow, and there's quite a few of them, but most of the top 5 polls anyway have the race pretty tight, especially when they polled what they call the swing states, or the key states, the 7 key states, and I'll try to run them down for you. But basically, North Carolina is one of them, Pennsylvania is one of them, Arizona is another one. North Carolina, if I didn't mention it. The three Rust Belt states, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Michigan. And then you have Nevada, what's they kind of Sun Belt states, what I mentioned, like Arizona, Nevada, and is it New Mexico or, no, Georgia. So those are the states, so the 7 key states that the pundits indicate are going to determine the outcome of this presidential race. Now, for those people that are new to politics or civics or political science, you know, our presidents are still determined or chosen by what we call the electoral college system. In other words, it's not the popular vote that determines who fills that office, okay? So it's almost a state by state. And except for 2 states that I'm familiar with, Nebraska and Maine, most states as of today, and it could change because I know Nebraska is considering changing the way they determine who takes the electoral votes for the presidential race. But presently it stands in Nebraska and Maine. Maine has 2 districts, 2 congressional offices. So they have 4 votes, I guess 4 electoral votes, because it's the number of senators and the number of representatives you have, congresswomen or men, and they totals up, and that determines the electoral count for each state. And I think Nebraska has 5. They have 2 senators and 3 congressional districts. But in Nebraska, whoever wins the congressional district, the presidential race, they get that electoral vote. So Omaha is a very liberal area for Nebraska, and it tends to go Democrat at the top of the ticket. So usually, even if the Republicans sweep the state, they usually lose that congressional district and therefore that electoral vote. And that's subject to change. Right now it hasn't. In Maine, to go back to Maine, the northern part of Maine is more historically conservative and tends to vote more conservative or Republican on the presidential races. Therefore, that congressional district tends to go, and it did go to Trump last time from my recollection. But the second district down by Portland, that's very liberal, tends to go Democratic. So Maine, historically, you might see that that split a little bit, the vote split, the electoral, and that northern district going for the Republicans and the other going for the Democrats. Excuse me, I don't know why I'm so tired. I did a lot of unpacking and packing today. I apologize for yawning. It's not because I'm bored, believe me. But Nebraska tends to go overwhelmingly Republican, but for that Omaha district. So if that changes, it could affect the race, because some pundits saying there's one pathway where if the Democrats, Kamala in this case, wins Omaha and takes the Rust Belt states like Michigan, Wisconsin, or whatever, Pennsylvania and Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota and Pennsylvania, and gets that one seat in Omaha, that congressional district, she could get 270 electoral counts, and that's enough, because you get 270. If you get that or above, you win the presidency through the electoral college. That's the majority of the electoral votes. Now, I'm not saying that's going to play out, but that's a concern. So the reason the Republicans want to change that Omaha way of doing it, or that Nebraska way of counting the electoral votes, is if the state goes Republican and they don't split it the way they do now, all those votes would go for Trump or the Republican candidate, and that would be 5. And it would prevent Kamala Harris or the Democrats, if they win the Rust states in Pennsylvania, the Rust Belt states, and they don't get that extra electoral vote from Nebraska, it brings it to a 269, And under the Constitution, which I didn't bring a copy of me today, but believe me, I've read it a number of times. It throws, if that happens, it goes to the House of Representatives. Congress decides, it's thrown to Congress, and they vote by state, but each state only gets one vote. Like California only gets one vote. Rhode Island, little Rhode Island, 1 million people, instead of 30 million like California, they get one vote, and if it's a tie, So most of the legislatures, the delegations at the state are Republican held. So the Republicans feel like if it's thrown into Congress, it's probably going to be to their benefit. Who knows? Because there's, my own view is there's a lot of Republicans that are anti-Trump. They just don't want to say it out loud. But when crunch time comes, they'll jump the ship. And they've already demonstrated it because this last vote in Congress, a lot of Republicans jumped on that SAVE Act. And so we're going to have that 3-month spending bill instead of a 6-month spending bill. If the SAVE Act, because you couldn't get the Republicans to do it, you had some people that are, they got wobbly knees, in other words. And I'm not as upset as I used to be, because as I get older, it's pretty evident that the culture of our country has changed. The culture of what a Democrat is has changed. The culture of what a Republican has changed, Basically, conservatism today in the American political culture has to be redefined. It's not what you take from your history books or your civic books or what you understand as an adult. If you're over 45 or 50, it's hard to imagine what passes for Republican or conservatism today as compared to the past. But be that as it may, there are true conservatives out there. I'm just saying the number, percentage-wise, in our country is probably a lot smaller than most people think. So you're actually considered almost a racist if you're a true conservative in some, especially from the leftist point of view. Now, I'm not trying to create a big argument here. I'm just giving you my opinion, and my opinion, is not foolproof. It's just an opinion. It's not. I'm just trying to say, in what's been considered a Democrat, you have to redefine that, because there's just a lot more progressives in the Democratic Party with the label Democrat, but they don't want to use the word socialist or Marxist in particular, or communist, but there's a lot of socialism, more Bernie Sanders element in the mainstream Democratic Party today in their platform than would have been electoral successful in the past to pull off in the 60s or 70s or even the 80s. But they have been successful in controlling state legislatures and even our national legislature. Right now, the Dems control the Senate. It's pretty close. And they have a lot of influence in the House, even though we have a narrow majority in a Republican. Republicans have one. But like I say, they don't have the discipline that in a narrow majority that Pelosi had on her party members. I can't even remember when she held power whether one Democrat ever just swayed from the party. I can't recall it ever happening. That swayed, one or two of them were in the Senate side under Schumer's leadership. You had Manchin and Sinema from Arizona. Was it Arizona or New Mexico? I can't remember. I think Arizona. They kind of like were, they didn't buy into all the planks of the Democratic Party, and they paid the price for it too. Sinema was ostracized, and Manchin, tried to mount an independent type of challenge in the primary, but it went nowhere. They punished their defectors harshly, less so on the Republican side of the ledger. So I touched on that, and I'm going to make my call. I think we're going to have a reprise of 2020. I'm not saying who's winning. I'm just saying it's going to be challenged one way or the other. It's going to be a close, maybe not by popular vote, but I think you're going to see a reprise of some of these states at 11:30, 10:30 shutting their operations. Say, we can't, we're going to give you the count when we give you the count instead of election night. That's just my call right now. Here's why I say that. I'm going to give you my rationale for I saying this, because I look back at 2016 and I look back at 2020, and it was evident when I look back that 2016, the Dems would be surprised that Trump won. And not only the Democratic Party, but I think the what they call the establishment, and Trump or MAGA people might say the deep state people or bureaucracy, whatever you, the elite or whatever you want to say, the media elites, the money people, the Washingtonians, the zip codes around D.C. where the government trough kind of keeps everybody nice, fat, and happy. They were surprised that Trump pulled it out. And there was shenanigans in the 2016 election. There's no doubt. You know, look at what the Department of Justice did to cleanse the shenanigans of Hillary's escapades. But needless to say, Trump won. Okay, and it's surprised, it's shocked, and so. And then 2020, look at what they did to prevent Trump from winning. And it was still a relatively close election. And I'm not going to touch on them all because it's a long laundry list. But it was evident that the media wasn't on Trump's side. You had the intel community with that thing to kind of disgrace the late-breaking October surprise on the Hunter Biden laptop exposure, with that 55, going into the papers of all these establishment people say it's a Russian fake operation. They paid no price for that, but that was election interference. Even the CIA acting director or whatever, he kind of confessed in congressional hearings that he was the mastermind putting that together. That's kind of electioneering. It's really Hatch Act violations and worse. It's what they're not supposed to do. They're not supposed to be intervening in domestic political affairs, and they knew what they were doing. Believe me, these people knew it. They were involved. Okay, look at the COVID thing. Even Pfizer, when they broke, their vaccine, they withheld that news till after the election. They knew the efficacy of that vaccine, or what they call the vaccine for COVID, days before the election, and they deliberately withheld it. The NIH people, I think it was 6 or 7 days after the election, they announced they had the vaccine to cure for the COVID, or what they said it was efficacy was enough to prevent the spreading or the impact of the COVID phenomena there. Now, Facebook, look what they did. Zuckerberg, the money that went in to mount the Democratic turnout and registration in those key states. Hundreds of millions of dollars got funneled, not to get out the vote for all people, but they targeted the registrations to get the vote out. The other thing that's a tell in 2020 is nowhere in American history up until that point, if the previous incumbent president got more votes than his first time, they won the election. You know what I mean? And even if they won, never did they most incumbents, if they won re-election, never got the same amount of votes they did the first time they won. Trump was different. He got millions of more votes than 2016, and yet he supposedly lost. I just wanted to throw that out there. It's never happened before in presidential electoral history of the United States that an incumbent that was running for re-election as president gets more votes and loses. It never happened before until 2020. Now, it doesn't mean incumbents always won. It just means incumbents that lost, they got fewer votes than before. And even if they won re-election before, they got fewer votes. Trump got more votes, millions more. I think it was 7 million more votes. So here's what I think the shenanigans won. If these people, it might never come out. It's like the JFK. A lot of stuff still hasn't come out. But if it does come out 30, 40, 50 years or 30 months from now, whatever, if it ever comes out, what they're going to have to find out if it was fraudulent, there was a lot of votes that were manufactured, harvested, or whatever to get Biden. Because Biden actually got more votes than Obama got. And Obama was very popular as a Democratic candidate and presidential candidate, both times. So you're saying Biden, who never even got a presidential primary election before being VP under Obama for 2 terms, gets more votes than Obama got. Just digest that, people. Democrats, digest that. He didn't even run a campaign to mobilize their votes. So if it did happen, and I'll grant you there's a possibility it was really an anti-Trump sentiment that got those votes for Biden and his vice president Kamala Harris. So what's that tell you? Trump factor, one way or the other. A lot more people voted for Trump than in 2016, and Trump lost. And supposedly, if we believe the 81 million votes that Biden and Harris got in 2020, it was because of their popularity. They were more popular than Obama. Hard to believe, but hey, let's put it out there as a possibility. So, tell me, people, and that's not even all of it. You know what I mean? That's not even all of it. Biden never campaigned in 2020. Never campaigned. They call it the basement, Now, here's the other thing to think about. Look at the shenanigans that went on after Trump gets into office. 2 impeachments for, how many presidents have been impeached twice while they were in office? 1 term. Let's count them. 1, Trump. Okay? Trump. And I'm just telling you, to me, it's a pattern here. The establishment does not want Trump to win again. Let's state it. That's what the beauty of having my own program. I can say this. A lot of people, for whatever reasons and good reasons, probably don't have the chutzpah to say it or the cojones because there's too much retribution and payback for them saying such. I'm beyond that. It's not that I have a lot of money or anything or whatever. I'm not trying to sell a book. I'm not trying to run for office right now or whatever. I'm just giving you my analysis as a Connecticut Yankee in a blue state and a follower of political science for many, many years. Okay, let's look at the players that the media, when I say the media, I'm telling you, the New York Times, Hollywood, okay, radio, print, the magazines, the elite magazines, and they're out there, believe it. If you don't read it or you're not a subscriber, they are. The New Yorker, the Atlantic, Foreign Affairs. These are the elite establishment pubs, and there's others. I'm not going to list them all. But they're out there, and they slam Trump every day. The New York Times, front page, editorials, the opinion. You pick that up anytime, and there's more bad press on Trump by far. A factor, it's not even, it's beyond, comparison now. It's so one-sided. But it's a badge of honor for that organ of the First Amendment to stick it to them. they're signaling to their people and their establishment, yes, Trump is not we don't want Trump in. They're the gatekeepers of the establishment. They want to signal to those people that are inculcated when they went to prep school. That's the stuff they were told to read. This is what you read every day. This is your badge. This is your tell that you're a member of the cream of society. Here's the pubs you read. Here's how you speak. Here's how you dress. Here's what you subscribe to. Here's what you don't do. Here's the enemies list over here. Okay? So the Post, the Washington Post, the New York Times, the LA Times, I can name the Chicago, there's things, and they're out to slice and dice and to send the signal to the people that read that, hey, this is a bad thing if you support Trump or you support him or people that follow him, you know what I mean, or people that support Trump. So that's out there, and it has an influence. Then you got social media, the Taylor Swifts, the Oprahs. They're all lined up, the Hollywood celebs. Look who spearheaded, did the walking and talking for the Obama that's behind all this, former President Obama and his crew. You had the actor from Hollywood, a well-known actor that's pretty much close with Obama, to, put that little editorial in the New York Times, George Clooney. That's just, he's the tool. It would be too upfront for Obama to put it in, you know what I mean? That would be too much of a breach of protocol to have a former Democratic presidential, very popular president, two-term president, putting the shiv on another Democratic incumbent president, supposedly winning the primary to put the shiv in them and take them out. But that's what happened. That's how they did it, okay? The threat of the 25th Amendment, which would have to involve a critical role of Kamala Harris. So she's in on it too. But what I'm saying is that's how it works in politics. It's about power. And the Democratic leadership has been more successful in enforcing their principles to maintain and acquire and maintain power, So I give it to them in a Machiavellian sense. But I'm just telling the people that don't follow politics as much as someone like myself or others, that you've been played as an electoral participant in the Democratic primary process. You've been played, but it happened more before what happened in August, after Obama's, pulled, after Biden's bad performance on the debate. It was just obvious. They set that up. That debate normally doesn't happen until after the conventions have endorsed the candidates. That early debate between not Obama, but Biden and Trump was set up by the Obama machine. You say, listen, we're going to go down if Biden's on the presidential ticket. Let's set up this debate to use that to freaking jettison them, okay? And it was successful. They conducted a master class on how to clean up a mess preemptively before going down because they're worried about the down ballot. If Biden was still on the ticket and he went down, their calculations are probably correct too. I give them credit. There would probably be catastrophic down ballot damage. And what do I mean by that? In other words, a lot of Democratic incumbent senators and congressmen and women might have not got reelected in close races. They probably would have went down. And that would have changed not just who runs the presidency and the executive branch, but who runs the Senate. And instead of getting control of the House again and maintaining control of the Senate, the Democrats could have been swept clean. And that would have been even worse than just losing the presidency. So I hand it to them, from a power dynamic analysis. Even if Kamala doesn't pull it out and Trump squeaks by, my analysis at this point, is the Dems probably won't suffer down ballot as much as if Biden was on a ticket with her as VP candidate going against Trump and Vance. But that's my analysis, okay? Now, other people that I kind of follow on this with this present race have indicated that they think a critical factor that might be considered by the people voting for the presidency hasn't happened yet that could shape the outcome. So I want to put that out there. In other words, it's been euphemistically called the October surprise. And I don't want to give the names because, but, you probably wouldn't recognize the names. They think it hasn't happened yet. But let's put some of those things that could happen that might shape the thing to put Kamala in or Trump in more definitively, make it more of or could change the dynamic from what the polls are saying right now. The polls on the national level, if you do popular vote, which again, like I mentioned before, doesn't determine the presidency, but it gets cited all the time. And sometimes it's cited for Machiavellian reasons, or what they call they're called push polls. In other words, we're going to showcase a poll that is favorable for us to help to impact the outcome of the race, okay? And so you can do those, and both sides do it. I'm not trying to just blame the Democrats on this or the Republicans. Both, it's done all the time in politics. But at the national level, Kamala polls better than Trump, like 4 or 5 points, nationally. But like we mentioned before, the presidential race isn't done on the number of votes nationwide for the presidency. It's done statewide, electoral. So you have to win the states individually. It's not just, Obama got 81 million and Trump got, or McCain got 80 million.5, therefore Obama wins. No, they look at the 50 states, and I even think the District of Columbia gets elected, So they look at those, who won those states, who, and like I said, Maine and Nebraska, who won those congressional districts in Maine and Nebraska, and then they tally up the electoral votes that are allocated to those districts in those 2 states, and they go. And that's how it's determined. So, but at those individual races, it's very close. And right now, the most recent one, I think, Trump is edging out Kamala in those competitive 7 states, okay? Not all of them, but predominantly. And another factor that some Democratic pollsters and commentators haven't even acknowledged is there's probably some, in these polls, there's probably some undercutting of the Trump support. It's being undercounted because they look back, I guess Nate Silver is a pollster that a lot of people have, cited with some credibility in this, and they look back and at the 2020 election and 2016, and in the polling leading up to those two, Trump's support was, not being reflected in those polls at the time. It was being undercounted, and some people say there's many reasons for it, or but it's just a fact that it's been observed in some places as much as 2 points and some others more. So some commentators say that undercounting, especially in those swing states, those what they call the competitive states, the Pennsylvania, again, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota. Those are considered the competitive states that, and you can tell by where they're spending their time. Look at where Kamala's been: Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, Georgia. You know what I mean? And Trump's doing the same thing. He's been focusing a lot on that. North Carolina, and that's where Kamala's been, So you'll see him touch some other states. They just got to do it because for fundraising and other things, But when it gets crunch time, you're going to see those 7 states coming up all the time. Trump and they're going to be touching in some of those states. The same day it's going to be that, depending on what their polls are saying. Hey, you got to keep them on. You're slipping here. You're slipping. You need it. Push. Pennsylvania's. My own view is, if the Democrats lose Pennsylvania, I think Kamala doesn't get the presidency. That's my call. I mean, doesn't mean that's what's going to happen. I'm just saying, if she loses Pennsylvania, I think the road to the presidency is very tough for the Democratic candidate. That's just my call. And I'm not I'm just throwing it out there for what it's worth, and it's not worth too much, okay? But my own view is, I've been involved in politics, and people say, there's no cheating. No, there is cheating in politics, believe me. And some of it's planned cheating. They call it other names, whatever you want to call it, special ops. There's all kinds of euphemisms for it, okay? Canvassing. They got all kinds of, but it does go on. And if it's going to go on, here's where it's going to go on, people, in those 7 states, okay? Those 7 states are where, your party organization, if you're on the other side, both sides should be doing this. I'm not saying one party does the planned, both sides do it. One side's better at it, as far as resources, money. They got donors that pony up money, like the Zuckerberg bucks, In the 2020 cycle, there was no big PACs, no big billionaires giving money to get the Republicans to turn out to vote, like Zuckerberg and some of the other people, okay? Now, a lot of shenanigans happened back in 2020. Some of them, they're legitimate now. They're not just COVID-type things we had to do for COVID. State legislatures have, codified early voting in a lot of states. Mail-in. Everybody gets a ballot in some states. Harvesting, in some states is more permissible than others. Early voting, and it's already happening in at least 3 states now. And next week, there are other states are coming online. A lot of the voting will have been done before November 5th. It might be on par with what happened during 2020, which I think, if I'm correct, I could have it flip-flop. It was either 40 or 60% of the voting was done before the presidential election day. I mean, it was that high, you know what I mean? So this early voting and, that the October surprise, if it's going to happen, either side, they both might have both sides, but here, my thing is because of early voting, they have to pull that October surprise a little earlier because, there's no use keeping something in your quiver to a couple of days before election if most of the people have already voted, before then. If you want to have an impact, you got to take the early voting, the mail-in voting, the drop box shenanigans, the canvassing, the postal type phenomena involved. You gotta factor that in if you're gonna pull the trigger. If you're the initiator, or you got something you want to spring on the electorate today, before you vote for president, you probably should hear about this or see this. Well, they kind of, and I think I'm right, because look what they did in North Carolina to the governor, the Republican candidate for governor. They sprung that thing. They would have held that back a few more weeks, I think, 20 or 10 years ago. But because of early voting in North Carolina, they sprung it when they did. And it's probably smart. If it's true, I don't know enough to verify those allegations out there. You know what I mean? But whether it is true or not, if it's true, they sprung it at the right time, given what happens in North Carolina. And North Carolina is a swing state. And I think that's going to impact, if that Democratic, surprise is successful, it could help Kamala in North Carolina, because it's going to it's going to damage the Republican turnout in what I call, most people, let's just put it, it's pretty much similar. If you're not familiar with, I lived in North Carolina when I was a kid, but North Carolina, most of the state is conservative, but your big cities, like Raleigh, it's Democratic, and usually if it goes Democratic, it's because of Raleigh in some of the suburbs. Now, Charlotte is still more conservative than Raleigh, but eventually the political scientists think that's going to go red too. It's kind of like Connecticut. Connecticut, if you looked at a map of Connecticut at the presidential races in 2016 and 2020, most of the state was red. Not by a lot, it was like 4 or 5 points, most of the jurisdictions of the towns. But in those 8 or 9 urban centers in Connecticut, it was blue, big blue. Hartford, Stamford, New London, Middletown, Waterbury, you name it. Bridgeport, blue as you can be, 85. And there was, believe me, there was harvesting there. I know because I've done some, I was fortunate enough to see some of the stuff from another job I had. And I said, there's no way, some of these districts in every street, 95% of the people voted, and they all voted Democrat except for like 1%. And when you knocked on the doors, the people didn't even live, a lot of those people didn't live. Now, it's transient, and they could have lived. I'm just saying that turnout doesn't happen without harvesting and someone working what they call the blocks of the precinct saying, I'm here and I'm going to be back tomorrow until you give me your ballot or fill it. That's how they do it, man. And don't tell people that it doesn't happen because, what did they tell you? Oh, it doesn't happen. When they had the videotape of the woman that worked for the city of Bridgeport, stuffing the ballots in the ballot box on camera. What happened to her? She still got her job. Then there was another one. She was training another worker to do the same thing. A black young man was doing it, working there too. Here's how you do it. I'm going to show you because you might have to go somewhere else and do another one. Now, that's me. That's my comment. No, they had to redo the primary because of it, but they did it and he won anyway. But so it does happen, okay? They had it on video where, they were picking up people. Hey, go in and here's some money. They were driving them to it. And you pay to play, pay to vote. Here's your $50. Here's your whatever. Well, they chauffeured them to the thing. it was nice. On video, doesn't happen. Well, explain this. Explain. If it didn't happen, why did you have to do the primary over, the Democratic primary for the city of Bridgeport? By the way, that's the one that decided the Foley race. Okay, remember that years back? Bridgeport, they found some more ballots after the polls were closed. This time we have to keep them open a little extra. Bridgeport, go to. When in doubt, Hartford to Bridgeport, that's where we can get our Democratic ballots if it's a close race. Now, they already planned for the close race. They just have reserve ballots in case they didn't plan enough. I mean, what a beautiful state, Now, Rhode Island and some other states even do better than Connecticut on that aspect because I'm just telling you, I live in Connecticut, so I'm focused on that. But believe me, it goes on in other places and probably more effectively and maybe not as necessary, because some states are really blue, like Rhode Island. You're not allowed to sneeze if you're a Republican in Rhode Island, from what I understand. You know what I mean? I know that's an exaggeration because there are such a thing as a handkerchief. But Rhode Island, God bless them. You know what I mean? They had their problems. Remember the lieutenant governor running for Congress? The petition signatures. What happened to that story? People. Hey, no, nobody went to jail for that. No one's doing time for that. It just didn't. It didn't happen. Those signatures were all just forged. A lot of them for the petitioning candidate. Come on, and it was a Democratic primary. This was Democrats cheating in their own primary, not against the Republican, but their little compadres. You know what I mean? So it's sanctioned. Come on, it's not like the cheating's allowed because we do it against the opposite party. Hey, Republicans, we can cheat because we're going against the Democrats. The Democrats, hey, we can cheat and do this because we're going against our arch enemies, Republicans. No, they were cheating in their own Democratic primary system. So it's DNA in their culture. It's just part of the, hey, we're Rhode Island. We're Bridgeport. We're Hartford. We're allowed to do this. Look, we did it before and nothing happened. I was on TV even. I didn't miss a paycheck. Every time I went to my online to check my deposit, my biweekly deposit from the city, hey, cha-ching, cha-ching, it was in there. I even got a little pat on my hiney for doing a good job because I was dressed appropriate when I went there and stuffed those babies in there. Did you see me? Did you see how I did it? Oh, it was sweet because I had done it before. You know, I'm beating that to horse because you know what? To me, that's an indictment on the state of Connecticut and people like myself, you out there in Washington. We tolerated that. We tolerate what's going on in our state. And now I can segue. I told you my prediction. If Harris and company, Tim, they don't take Pennsylvania, the race goes to Trump. And if Kamala takes Pennsylvania, but she can't take the southern states, which I call the Sun Belt, which is Georgia, Nevada, and New Mexico, and the legislature in Nebraska, which I don't think they have the balls to do it, because Republicans, the true most ballsy Republican in the House of Representatives is a woman from Georgia, Taylor Greene. Everybody knows it. I'm just telling you what it is. She's got more terrestrial balls than any male Republican candidate in the House of Representatives right now. And there's some good ones in there, but I'm saying she's the most strong, in-your-face Republican that challenges the stuff that's going down in the House of Representatives. She's the one that called out President Biden during the State of the Union. Listen, you don't even do anything for what happened to the young girl in Georgia, in my district, that got killed by an illegal alien, immigrant, coming across the border. Viciously raped and murdered on her own campus by someone that you let in unvetted as presidents with your policies. She called him out on President of the Union, and he couldn't even get the name. We all know that. But I didn't see anybody else doing it. Did you? No. That's what I call leadership. And it might not, you might be on the side and say, well, I don't like that because I like the Democrats, what they do. No, but you still got to acknowledge when someone has the chutzpah to challenge someone else. You know what I mean? So I just put it where it is. Now let's move on. We've got 5 minutes left, a lot here. But what about this public benefits bullshit in the state of Connecticut, where the people that pay their bills for electricity have to subsidize the people that didn't pay their bills? For 4 years, some people. Now, we all know COVID was the excuse, but that was originally a 2-year program. The governor extended for 2 more. The legislature went on, and guess what? Nobody wants to touch this. You know why? Because it's going to be down to their negatively is going to affect the governor, the legislature, and it's going to affect the utilities too, and PURA. They're all guilty and complicit in this. And guess what? It's on both sides of the aisle. Republicans and Democrats up in Hartford, they're complicit in this thing. And it's going to hurt the state of Connecticut competitively because this public benefits, I call it a tax. It's a tax on our businesses and residential homeowners in the state of Connecticut. And you know what? It's going to hurt the middle class. It's going to eliminate the class. We're all going to be classless, the middle class, because this is a big bite out of disposable income. And it's going to affect consumption patterns and other items in our state. And I blame the Republican. And guess what? One of the Republican leadership married a never source executive. This thing was tolerated when she was in the legislature in Connecticut. And we all know who I'm talking about, Thelma Claridis. Now, there's just too much nepotism, cronyism, corruption in Hartford. Regulatory capture is a term you should Google if you don't know what it means, but that's what's going on up there. And it's not just our utilities and PURA. It's just not Eversource. it's in other things. Our NGOs, our nonprofits, all the charities, they've been regulatory captured. The state, the money that's going out, and it's in the construction, the schools, the public school systems, the unions, the state troopers, they're unionized. They all get what they demand because they support the one-party state, you know, and it's bleak. But the adverse impacts of this public benefits thing, $800 million to recoup, and if it falls on people that pay the bills, you're going to incentivize other people to do the same things. You know, I'm not going to pay my electric bill. Guess what? I want someone else to subsidize. And at a certain date, they can't turn off the power. So if that bill becomes too burdensome and you push more people on that aren't going to pay their bills, the people that are paying an exorbitant public benefit cost, that might increase. And also they're putting the electric vehicle mandates into that public benefit calculation as well. So, and that's tied into the, what I call, and I know people don't support it completely, but I'm opposed to this, the Governor Lamont's push on the green agenda, because the the wind turbines, the solar, the EV thing, I think it's gonna, it has, but it's gonna lead to a really a poor state economically. You're gonna drive industry out, you're gonna drive residents out, you're gonna make transportation very expensive, you're gonna have car sales drop, you're gonna have the cost of energy filtering into other things because of the electric mandates are going to push up other things. All factors of production will go up because of these green energy mandates. It's going to make housing even more expensive than it already is in our state. And for those people, I want to touch on housing because it's a tight market. Interest rates have been reduced, so the Fed did cut them by 50 basis points, but do you know there's almost 3,000 realtors in the state of Rhode Island, but as of yesterday, there was only 500 houses on the market listing. There was only 500 houses listed, and only 24 of those 500 that were listed in Rhode Island at the time, the listings in the state of Rhode Island, only 24 of those listings were under $300,000 or less. And I think, I can't remember, and it could have been, there was a few under 500,000, but most of the listings were over 500,000, percentage-wise, were over 500,000. But there was only 24 listed under 300,000. Kind of sad. In Connecticut, I can't give you, but until next week, thanks for watching, and have a good evening.